Wonderful. So today we're getting to talk about a really fun project that happened a few years ago in the state of Massachusetts in the United States. And it was working with the Boys and Girls Club of the greater Lowell area. So this is up just north of Boston, Massachusetts. And I believe it happened started in about 2009, 2010, Luzma, is that right?
2002.
2002, great. So this is a project that Luz Maria Puente, that I'm talking with, and her husband, partner, Howard Bino did for a little while, working with the civil society community in their local area. And Luzma, what is sort of the size of the group? Is that, I guess, the group that you were working with, and more or less the number of kids that they're influencing and the kind of programs that they do?
They had
So how many projects? Looking at the size of this community, more or less, is it 10, 100, 1,000 people you were working with, and sort of how big is the Boys and Girls Club representative of kids that they're influencing, or families, or something like that? What scale are we talking about?
Is the Lawrence Boys and Girls Club. Lawrence is one of the poorest area in Massachusetts. This is a non-for-profit organization. They were serving 300 kids. They had a really good programs. Their facilities needed some work. The employees were fantastic, but they were burned out, and they were in the middle of a crisis, a financial crisis. They were at the end of their financial resources. They only had one more month to pay salaries, and they called us because they needed to do something to reverse and stop the closing up of the place. The place is fantastic. They help to keep kids out of the streets, and mainly is most families were only one parent, and the young ones, if they do not stay out of the streets, they will end up in jail. So they were doing a fantastic public service.
That's excellent. And what stakeholders or groups were involved in the process that you did? So you were working with some of the staff, or parents also, or a board, or?
What we did some interviews for the parents and the faculty. We interview the board. We work very close with the board and with the CEO of the place. We did not interview directly the parents. What we did is we gave them survey questions, so they will answer and give us their feedback, and that some of the teachers fill out the questions, and some of the parents.
Excellent. So this is what we would call now a strategic clarity 1.0, but a strategic clarity mapping exercise, right? Of trying to understand what the group is trying to achieve, what are their challenges in trying to achieve that, and what kind of dynamics they could take on as a group to leverage their capacity to shift their dynamics. So it was a strategic clarity process. And
yes, we apply the Managing from Clarity framework, and we also use this opportunity to try to integrate another one of our colleagues, Marshall, and with his company is called Idiagram. So we were trying to use his abilities and possibilities and our framework, the Managing from Clarity. So we did it together.
Excellent. So we have the link and the knowledge base to the group, so they can find out more about the group, and to the diagrams that came out of the ideogram work and out of your work in this process. Excellent. So what kind of insights do you think were gained, or did you see were gained from going through this process, given also where they were in their challenge of having very little financial resource and very little timing left? I mean, engaging in this process here, what were some of the key insights that you saw?
It was a restructuring of the board. It was the way they were structuring. It was just trying to gain people to donate to the cause, and what they did is they had a huge board structure, many hundreds of people that they just wanted to have their names in the letterhead, and they faced all these members, but no one were really working at the level that they needed. So we restructured the board. We have wonderful people being part of the board, and we have a lawyer. So when we start understanding what were the issues, why are we facing this financial stress, and what can we do right now? So when we start applying the framework, and we start understanding what each stakeholder needs to have to be engaged in the system, we understand that the board was not working. Few people, 5 people, were always the same ones that will be called every time there was a problem, and usually they were called for them to write a check. So that was the way to solve the financial problems, but that was not sustainable, and they just couldn't put enough money to keep the doors open. So
and the evidence for that was that they only had a month left of funding. So that Band-Aid approach, with a lot of people not doing much and a few people paying, wasn't helping them be resilient and sustainable.
Yes. So the survival of the institution was a very serious issue. They didn't know what to do. The president of the club was new, and he didn't know he was receiving the organization in that state. And the previous president, doing a great job, couldn't quite give a great picture of the financial picture of the place. And they have big campaigns, financial campaigns, to raise money for the club. And usually those campaigns will bring that money to keep the doors open. That was not the case at this point. So when we do the restructuring of the board, they understood what was needed, and we start giving solutions and start understanding what are the actions that we're able to take immediately, so the doors will stay open. And that was through Marshall's facilitation and the creation of the causal loop diagram that we did as part of the Managing for Clarity framework.
Do you remember other insights from the process for yourself or for the group, and other things of, one is we're depending on the board to come in and fix things and fund things, and that's not working to the level it needs to, even though they're very committed and we're doing great work. Do you remember any other sort of key insights that came out of the process for you or for them? Or
we restructured the capital campaign. We restructured the board, and inside the board, the capital campaign, and the actions that were able to be taken. Grant writer. So this person was fantastic because she was able to pay her own salary, and she was able to bring more funds. And as we start engaging everybody into the process, we start seeing that the board was very separated, trying to fix the financial situation, and all the people that were in charge of the programs for the kids were only dealing with the kids. So it was like very separated. You deal with the problems and I deal with the kids. When we brought everybody together, the board, and all the faculties, everybody together, we gained a lot of insights of what was working very well, because the kids were well taken care of. The staff, everybody had from 30 to 40 years working for that institutions. Many of them started as kids in the club. So everybody very loyal to the cause and dedicated to the kids. So when we start bringing the board with the staff, so what a great service we're doing. So you're doing such a great job. How come are we in such a bad situation, financial situations? So as we start seeing what was needed to create a transition, the survival mode into a little more stable financial situation, and after that, they start raising a capital donation. Someone show up from the club and match, he said, up to $1 million if they can raise some money. So they engaged some people that were talking about on the radio, and people start giving donations. So it was just a survival mode until everything starts moving, starts working out. They needed many things. That the facilities were, we call it the what is the great tape used to, give me the word. What is that great tape that you put when things are breaking?
Right, duct tape.
Duct tape. So we said no more duct tape, because the air conditioning, the computers, the tables, everything was held with the duct tape. So we started saying we're going to create a program where no more duct tape, because everything was falling apart.
Right. So it sounds like part of the insight was we're at the very end of funding. We've always asked for funding from a few people and other people who don't show up, and it's not working. But instead of saying, well, we got to cut programs, we actually need to bring in somebody else to help fundraise even more, the grant maker. And if we do that right, they can increase. We need to restructure how we're committing with each other to show up on the board. And instead of saying, you, the faculty, go off and do all this beautiful work and we'll figure this out for you, we needed to come together as a community to take it up. And a co-commitment that we're not going to use quick fixes like duct tape anymore. We're going to actually say we're going to have to figure out how to do it right, because the duct tape always falls apart and it keeps getting us into worse and worse problems. Yeah,
and the way we figure out how to raise money in different ways, and the main two big fundraising programs were in place, but we had other possibilities to raise money. And instead of thinking what programs are we going to cut, is how are we going to stay open. So once we were able to pass the survival mode, then we were able to start thinking in the long term. But at that point, when we started, it was like we cannot even think about long-term planning when the doors are not going to be open for the next month. So
there for me, you're starting to talk about, and I want to shift to, and maybe you can't name names for their particular, protecting their identity, but what were some of those kinds of experience or shifts that people started to experience in the way they were engaging in this? So one of them I started to hear, instead of saying we're just, how do we keep the doors open and we got through survival mode, to what programs that got, how do we keep this place open and doing beautifully? Instead of saying it's your problem or a couple of you figure it out, we are going to figure that out. So there's a couple of kinds of shifts. What are the kinds of shifts or experience did you see happening in the folks as they went through this process and afterwards?
I think it was very powerful when the staff got together with the board, because the board was very tired of being called only to write checks. And when they start seeing what great, they knew it, but just start seeing from the kids and from the staff what a great job they were doing, they were even more energized to make it happen. It was just fantastic. In one meeting, they're saying, but the board cannot be structured as we need to restructure. And we had an attorney with us, and we were like 10 people, not many. And he said, I can start writing. You tell me, what do we need to do? And he started writing and changed the bylaws and changing the structure of the board right there. I was like, but it was fantastic. They couldn't see it before. So when we came into play, it was just, we didn't know about anything about the club. We didn't know about the board or anything, or the structure. But once we identified that was one part that was not working, and it was a limitation for the survival of the club, they start seeing that it was a collaboration of all of them. It was not the board or president, for everybody make this happen. So it was an integration, and we are all going to make it happen. So it was really cool.
That's great. And so now, what kind of impacts? You started to talk about impacts for, first of all, they survived the first month, and then they made it through survival, and then sort of getting into investing and people in invest mode. But so this project started in 2002.
2002, they were able to survive. They were able to raise enough money to build new facilities for the whole club. So they turned down the previous club, and in front of that, they have the space, and they create a beautiful, beautiful club. And I remember one of the issues is that they didn't have enough money to comply for the pool to be working. So they couldn't teach the kids to swim. So now they have this beautiful pool with complying with everything. And I remember they couldn't afford a swimming teacher. And one of the board members said, this is so important for the kids to know how to swim. I'm going to pay for that teacher. So they start seeing what are the minimum things to start working until they start raising money through the radios and asking for people. And then one of the people that were at the club said, I'm going to match up to 1 million. So they raised enough money to create and build a new club. And it was fantastic. And I remember one of the issues was that the young ones didn't have enough space, didn't have a space for them. So there were the little ones playing around, and the teenagers didn't find a good space to be. So they built this fantastic place for the teenagers. They have the computer labs, they have the music studios to record music, to come and play with new instruments. So it was a fantastic. So it was wonderful to see in such a bad place where the club was when we started, and then when we were at the inauguration of the new club, it was just unbelievable, really cool. And one of the issues was, can we really serve 300 kids? And the idea is with the new club was we're not going to only serve 300 kids, but it went to 500 kids with the new facilities. So it was fantastic. The financial needs for the club were almost the same. Even the club, it was almost double the size because it was more efficient. No more duct tapes. The heat was working. The air conditioning was working. So everything was working. And the grant money, they were able to be in a really good place. We had a second intervention in 2006, so they can have so they can create a strategic plan for 2012, and that was to serve 600 kids. So it was a really good way to grow, to serve more kids, because they were doing a great job and they were growing and growing. So they're still on.
That's great. So this is a great example for me of coming into community and saying there's a lot of beautiful resource here. A lot of great things are happening, and there are difficulties in the way that we've segmented the work of the community, and that we're not coming together. We're not able to see this all together, and not everybody's participating at the same level. So it's becoming difficult to even fund the basics of this. But by coming together and seeing the whole and seeing some of these core dynamics and saying, what can we start with and how can we self-fund some of that growth, that you're able to shift the conversation to what we can do together and how we can take on pieces of that together, and therefore come back and say, we do have a home for the beautiful work that's happening. And we've been able to double the number of kids served, and families included, and the age group, extend the age groups that are served by including people in a different, more efficient conversation. at a very strategic level. That's great.
Mhm.
So the link I said to the website that people can go and see what the place looks like and what's happening now, the kinds of programs they offer there, and the use of the ideogram work with Marshall is also available, and the documents that you did at the 2 different times to come and say, this is what we did in 2002, and then this was the plan for 2012, so people can look at those of how you use the managing from clarity process, which we now call the strategic clarity process, to look at the whole and what are we willing to take up and how can we do all this together. It's a great project, Luzma. Thank you.
And another piece was they wanted to build an endowment, and just to be sure that they will never go back to 2002, where they were not able to support themselves. So the build of the endowment, they had a special consultant that will help them build that, to work on that.
That's great. So they have self-sustaining ability to be resilient to changes that are coming forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it.